Hello, everyone. For this session 4 reflection, we're going to talk a little bit about risk response and risk planning. The first question: identify and define the 4 options for risk response planning. Provide an example of when you use one of these options to mitigate risk, and did you reduce the risk? First, avoid and threat or exploit a threat is the first response strategy, and in most cases, as a project manager, we would like to avoid all threats, but as you dig deeper into some threats, they may become areas of opportunity. To transfer a threat or share an opportunity is having the ability to allow a third party to manage risk for the project. Now, this becomes a risk in its own self, but if you've done your research on the specific third party, then you have mitigated your risk, which brings us to the mitigation of a threat or enhance an opportunity. Being able to have mitigation plans for the identified risk is a lovely technique. As you and your team have already identified the risks at the beginning of the project, you have also developed mitigation plans for these risks. Accept a threat or an opportunity is the last resort technique, or should only be used when all other techniques and strategies have failed. Now, accepting a threat doesn't mean accepting defeat. It merely states that in a rare case, a contingency plan or fallback plan needs to be in place and implemented in case something drastically goes wrong during the project. The example of mitigation that I have is for the 44 on-net sites that we encountered while working with discount tire centers, and these sites needed to have holes drilled or bored into their buildings because the conduit was not accessible for the cable internet to be installed. The mitigation plan that was in place was to have DTC install their own conduit at these locations, and then we could proceed with the install. By being able to identify these 44 sites and the preliminary screening for the sites, we were able to save time and money by staying on track, which helped us remain within the budgeted guidelines. The next question would be: explain the difference between a contingency plan and a fallback plan. Provide an example of when you used each plan at work. Contingency planning is targeted at potential events that, if they occur, could negatively impact the project. As such, this method is employed typically within risk management, so it is under project manager's responsibility. I visually associate it with shades of gray when presenting to stakeholders to indicate a range of potential approaches based on impact, severity, risk tolerance, etc. The example that I have for the contingency plan is the fact that we needed to ship equipment out to the sites, but most of the sites are construction zones and do not have specific locations. Thus, we had to use a contingency plan that was agreed upon by both parties, and this plan entailed shipping all equipment to the Berks Central location several days in advance in order to have a site director deliver the equipment to the end user sites. The fallback planning is directed to a known specific activity that could fail to produce desired outcome. It is typically associated with technical procedures under the responsibility of the technical lead. Project manager must ensure that it is created and validated, but may not even have the technical expertise to contribute to it. As a visual expression, I use black and white to show that it's either in or an out situation. The fallback plan that we had to use came very early in the project, as we discovered that the scope of work did not match with our scheduled timeline. Therefore, we were not going to be able to deliver a cable internet network solution to the client. This needed a fallback plan of delivering a cellular solution to 642 sites to ensure that we had achieved some sort of internet connection until all the sites are able to have a cable internet provider installed at that location. The next question was: explain the difference between risk response plans and risk management plans. A risk response plan involves determining ways to reduce or eliminate any threats to the project and also the opportunities to increase their impact. A risk management plan is the document that a project manager prepares to foresee risks, estimate impacts, and define responses to the risk. This would also include a risk assessment matrix with priority levels of the risks. Next question would: what can you recommend when the cost of risk mitigation is greater than the cost impact of the risk? If the cost of the risk mitigation is greater than the cost of the impact, the risk will merely be tracked and not acted upon. These risks are usually low-level priority risks that are within the acceptable range of the project risk assessment plan. The next question was: what mitigation actions did Nehemiah implement? Transfer of risk, risk acceptance, risk avoidance, or risk mitigation? I believe that Nehemiah may have used a combination of risk acceptance, transfer of risk, and risk mitigation to overcome his enemies. As Nehemiah accepted that the enemy will be coming, he decided to accept the risk and transfer the risk to the families as he posted them near the exposed wall with the swords, spears, and bows. Nehemiah also mitigated the risk by allowing the enemies to know that they were ready for any invasion, and that he spoke with his people about the Lord, who is great, and to stand up for their families, their sons and daughters, their homes. This type of inspirational speaking, as well as grit that is ingrained in each and every one of us, has never been more intense when you're fighting for the livelihood of your family. That was our session 4 video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much.